Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Crypto Convos. I'm your host, MK Lords, and I'm back after a 2-week hiatus, so I thank you for sticking around. My guests today are Nathan Wosnack and David Mondrus, formerly of BitNation. Now, you may recall a couple weeks ago I had Suzanne Tarkowski-Tempelhoff on from BitNation, and we had a pretty interesting discussion, and you may also recognize David and Nathan from Coins in the Kingdom, which was the conference that I organized the week before last. It went really well. David actually is the groom of the blockchain wedding, which was a really big event. That was really fun. And yeah, so I'm really happy that they're here to join me today. We're going to be discussing their departure from BitNation later on in the show. Right before the crowd sale, they ended up resigning along with another team member, Matt McKibben, because they were citing security concerns and a few other concerns with how BitNation was being operated. So we're going to delve into that in just a little bit. But first, I want to see how you guys are doing.
Doing great, thanks.
Doing good.
Awesome.
Yes, it's much nicer than Vancouver weather. So.
Yeah, so you're joining us from South Florida, and Nathan, you're originally from Vancouver, right?
Originally from Edmonton, Alberta, and I moved to Vancouver about 5 years ago, and then I came down here, and I'm hoping to stay for as long as possible.
We basically kidnapped him.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good. I know it's beautiful down there. I mean, I had such a blast down in Orlando. I'm up, in Pensacola, which is about the same weather, but yeah, it was really nice down there. How did you guys like Coins in the Kingdom? What did you think of the conference?
Well, David, go ahead.
It was great. It was a little bit smaller than I expected, but not surprisingly, and it was wonderful. It was nice to meet. Who was there? Andreas was there, and Bruce Fenton was there, and of course having Jeffrey Tucker, do the
Will Pangman. I love Will
awesome.
Pangman.
Yeah, yeah, and it was good to put some faces to names. So like Jamie Redmond, who I've only known on Facebook. It was really great to run into him in person. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice to meet finally with people who I've been talking to all year. I mean, obviously, I've spoken with you pretty much, several times a week for several months, and although some of the people I wanted to be there couldn't make it, like Christoph Atlas and Blake Anderson, I got to meet some really great people, and I'm really obviously excited about that, and made some contacts and got to go to some good speeches, and Bruce Fenton had some good talks, and I got a chance to sit down and buy Andreas a drink, and he gave me like about 15 minutes of his time. It was awesome. I had a really good time.
Yeah, it was great.
Awesome. Yeah, it was definitely a smaller conference. We were kind of competing with the Vegas one, but I like to think it was a very intimate conference. Everyone had a really good time, and I think just the right people showed up. So it was really, really awesome.
The hardcores, definitely a lot of anarchists.
Yeah, we don't want those Vegas gamblers anyway.
No.
Right, and we tried to go with like a happier theme because we did Bitcoin in the Beltway a couple months before, and that was kind of an edgier theme. But we were like, let's do something fun. Let's throw a party basically. So, and I think the wedding kind of fit really well into the party.
And the cake was good.
Oh yeah,
the cake was good. And it was just cute seeing, Bruce Fenton's kids running around, and other kids running around, and Jason's kids and stuff. So
very, very impressed with Bruce's son with the Bitcoin mugs. We have 2 of them in the house now, and I told Bruce that what he should do is he should get them signed by all the notables and then sell them as collector's items. I'd pay more for a mug with Charlie Shrem's signature on it for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Oh man, yeah, I have my mug too. I wish it was next to me so I could show it off. They're the coolest orange mugs, and it's a really nice shade of orange too. And yeah, Alexander was persistent. He was just like, he had other kids working for him, which I thought was cool.
Yes.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree,
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they had a whole team. It was.
I was mentioning I was like 50 cents short. He's like, nope, it's going to be 10.50. I'm like, all right. So I'm like digging through my pocket, and he's going to be a future business leader. I feel it.
He
I was negotiating with him and marketing on the mugs. But I already got one from you, so you buy me another one cheaper.
I mean, it was hard to resist buying more. It really was. He was persistent. So that is so awesome. So how did you guys find out about Bitcoin technology in general? What was your introduction to it?
Well, I had sort of been into the whole libertarian movement for a while, and anarchism eventually, and I was really big into Austrian economics, and I was reading, Mises Institute for a number of years, got into Ron Paul, and it was a friend of mine that actually got me into reading Satoshi's white paper in July of 2009, so very long time ago. And it was that fall of that year, November, I started using Bitcoin, and it wasn't until I guess about a year ago I heard about David Johnston and what he was doing with BitAngels and the dApps, and so I sort of got into blockchain technology. So it's been kind of an adventure. I left for a couple of years in 2011 after Mt. Gox had their first sort of scandal in June 2011. Left and came back after a good friend of mine introduced me back into Dogecoin and said, "Hey, check out this crazy alternative currency. You gotta mine it. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of it." And then shortly thereafter, I ended up finding a whole bunch of Bitcoin I had abandoned on my computer. The rest is history. Started a company, started another company, and I'm here today because of that. So.
Yeah, I've been in the .com space since about '94, and so in 9 or 10, I started looking for something more interesting. Because the .com boom was kind of dying out. There wasn't really anything to focus on. So I was looking for something to focus on, and in about, I guess, early 11, I started mining. But at that point, I was only mining on a laptop CPU, so I didn't exactly get much. But I kept persisting, and I kept trying, and I tried to build a team to actually do the same thing that Coinbase is doing. Eventually got a better miner. Took a little while to plug it in. And then I started reading the protocol and just reading the protocol. And I literally sat up in bed one day and said, "Oh my God, Bitcoin solves MERS." And so for those of us who don't know, MERS is the Mortgage Electronic Reconciliation System, which is basically the central repository for all mortgages in the United States. And because it was so poorly managed, it was responsible for tens of thousands of illegal foreclosures. People getting kicked out of their houses even though they own them outright. People getting kicked out of their houses because even though there was no wet ink and nobody knew who was really owned it. And so for me, the real excitement is in using the transparent crypto ledger technology, as I like to call it, to solve the non-financial aspects of Bitcoin. Deeds, mortgages, marriages, obviously, and so on and so on.
All right, so what were some of the other Bitcoin-related projects you were involved in before BitNation?
So, I mean, I guess, starting from the beginning in 2010, I was part of mybitcoin.com, which was the world's first wallet service for Bitcoin. And obviously, shortly thereafter, we had a security issue. There was basically a shopping cart vulnerability exploit on our site. We ended up losing a bunch of the coin, which, of course, made me a little bit discontent with the whole community when that happened. After that, I started an organization called Crypto Miners, and I got some investment to start, mining with ASIC hardware. And as you know, unfortunately, mining difficulty rose, quite drastically over the month of March up until, just recently. So I ended up getting out of that. Worked for Crypto Biz magazine for a while. I was one of the co-founders, and then decided to kind of branch off and do my own thing. And so since then, I have my own consulting company called Ubiquity. And so we're doing AML and KYC compliance consulting, introducing people to Bitcoin, and doing communication. Sort of how I found BitNation, and of course, we all kind of know how that happened or how that came about. So, yeah.
I was involved with a company called CryptoWorks earlier this year. We were looking to raise funds to basically be a blockchain factory, which is where the name comes from. And to create Bitcoin 2.0 services like deeds and mortgages and, deeds, not mortgages, but deeds and titles and accounting, ledgers and stock trading and voting. We weren't successful in raising, unfortunately, and that happens. So kind of doing a pivot and really going to focus this time on more concrete examples of the technology. So, for example, trying to popularize the idea of putting your marriage vows in the blockchain, or really going after things like conveyance fraud in the U.S., which is a $500 million mortgage problem. So, interesting stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And so there are a lot of other Bitcoin 2.0 projects out there now that are kind of offering similar services to BitNation. So, and it's very ambitious. It's a very ambitious undertaking. So what stuck out about BitNation to you? What made you decide to join the BitNation team over maybe some of the other projects like Ethereum or...
Right.
Well, I think for me, obviously I knew that Ethereum was definitely in the works for quite a long time. I know that people have been kind of waiting for it since last February, and so I became a little bit, disappointed. I'm not a developer. I'm a technical person. I have a telecom background, and I understand a lot of the high-level stuff. But as not a developer, I couldn't obviously do anything with Ethereum besides use it as an end user, or perhaps adapt it into any existing projects. I think the biggest thing that kind of attracted me to BitNation really was, the idea of global governance 2.0. I had previously been in the free man movement, and obviously I left that because of some of the issues that existed with that. And I felt to myself, well, gee, this is a good way to kind of bring together the community, but also using existing technologies to be able to make that happen. And so, I mean, Suzanne obviously was quite convincing, and the community of some of the former Ethereum people being involved were obviously quite convincing as well. And I just wanted to be part of something new and exciting, and that's sort of, I guess, how I got involved.
Yeah, and for me, one of the big draws was that Charles Hoskinson was involved at the beginning.
Right.
And I really, admire Charles, and I really want to work with him. It's really great to work with people who are incredibly intelligent and, just a lot to learn from. But then he bowed out, and so actually what happened was when he bowed out, I bowed out as well the first time. But then, I'm a true believer in the concept of BitNation, and even though this implementation isn't successful or isn't very successful, others will be. So I came back a second time to try to move it along and just try to move the ball forward a little bit. And then we ran into some issues with Suzanne, and I just couldn't be a part of that organization any longer. I have some hard and fast rules in my life, and this tripped one of them, so had to go.
So when did you first start working with BitNation, and what were your roles at that time?
So, I mean, I started on September 1st, and my role was just in the communications department. And so immediately, I flourished. I ended up meeting Tamara Hassan, who introduced me. She had just started just before me, and we started organizing a bunch of stuff for it and reaching out to the media. And when I started, obviously, I got Suzanne on Max Kaiser and RT News. I got Wall Street Journal writing about her twice, and Cointelegraph. Obviously, we all have friends at Cointelegraph. So they wrote about her. Bitcoin Magazine wrote about her as well. And I think I did pretty well on the communications side. Unfortunately, due to some of the technical people leaving the organization for obvious reasons, which we'll, I guess, discuss a little bit later on, I had to take over some of the role as kind of an interim COO, handling a lot of the technical stuff. I mean, I was going on there trying to help manage the server and update the site and work with the tech team. So I was handling like 3 different departments, and it was a bit overwhelming. I'd call it. So.
Yeah, I think I started somewhere in like mid-September or something.
Yeah.
And really more as of an advisor than a doer. When you're the CTO, typically you don't go hands-on on the keyboard. You typically have people who do it for you.
That's right.
And that was kind of the understanding that I had with Charles as well. When I came back, I brought, and what I ended up doing is that bringing technical people in, friends of mine, convinced them to join, and they would leave for various reasons. And Charles would do the same. He'd bring in people, and they would leave. And eventually, I handed over some of my development contacts to Suzanne, and she used them to move the ball forward and to launch the site. But it wasn't cool, man.
Yeah, so BitNation kind of seemed like it came out of nowhere. I mean, I hadn't really heard about it much, and then I saw it getting a lot of attention and hype and stuff. So you said you joined in September. How long had it been active before then?
I would probably say, and I'm sure that someone online will correct me about it if I'm wrong. There's no doubt about that. But I think it was around the last week of August is really when we started kind of organizing the team more publicly, and then it was the first week of September I got the ball rolling with obviously with Tamara, and then eventually Matt joined on, I think about a week and a half later, 2 weeks later, and we just definitely worked well together, and we continue to work really well together.
Yeah, I mean, one of the powers of the concept, and one of the positives of Suzanne is the ability to bring together all of these people who really believe in this and are willing to devote their time, their energy, and themselves to make it a success. But unfortunately, that's not sufficient. You need more.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was such a short time frame between, when it kind of started really being put together as a team to the crowd sale. So I definitely didn't realize that. What were some of the first red flags you kind of saw that made you question, maybe the larger project?
Well, it's exactly that. The fact that we launched the thing in September, and she wanted it launched by October 10th for the pre-crowd sale. I thought that was not enough time. We didn't have a white paper that was even remotely ready, and it certainly wasn't ready when we launched it. And that was one of the biggest pushbacks I had. Besides that, we didn't even have any financials. One of the people who were associated with BitNation, Ty, was working on it, but we hadn't even seen the financials till the very, very end, and they were quite pie in the sky. So to answer your question in a non-roundabout way, my biggest concern was, I think, the way that Suzanne treated her team. There was a lot of public beratement. I noticed that there's a lot of people who would just basically get yelled at for not performing in the way that Suzanne wanted. And certainly she didn't take a lot of our advice seriously. She wouldn't listen to many of the things that we had wanted to implement in the organization to give it more structure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing about this is when you ask volunteers for their time, you should be respectful of that time, of them, and the efforts they put in, and that really wasn't forthcoming. So that's okay. Some people have different personalities, and it doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that they have different personalities. Mm-hmm. But then things escalated pretty quickly, and I got really, really uncomfortable. I guess it was starting on Thursday evening of we were supposed to launch on Friday. And so, the 9th,
I guess it would be, yeah.
Right, and so on Thursday, we were out at dinner, and Tariq, I'm not sure what company Tariq is with, comes out on one of the counterparty boards and warns everyone of an imminent SEC crackdown. And now it's been all over the papers, so everybody knows about it. And we had been warned of this by others previously, multiple other sources. And so the concern that we had was, well, I'm a U.S. citizen. I obviously have a U.S. jurisdiction, or under U.S. jurisdiction, and I have no intention of going to jail for this. I mean, I like the concept and so on, but it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and so you have to be able to do this for a long time. And so we asked Suzanne, about that concern many times, and her answer was, well, we're not an American company. I'm not an American citizen, and so I don't really care. Well, that's great for you, but it's not that good for us. And so that was kind of one of my really big concerns. And then, of course, we ran into Nathan's health problem, which kind of was really the icing on the cake, I guess.
Well, the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah, exactly. But before that, I think I wanted to bring up one thing, is that a member, a person who was involved with the organization, I'm not going to name his name, but he had warned me a couple days before. It was around 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, Nathan, there is no contract. We have no terms of sale. You need to write this thing up. And I'm thinking to myself, well, first of all, I'm not a lawyer. Why am I writing up legal documentation? And second of all, wait a second, who is our lawyer? And then it kind of occurred to me that our only lawyer was Suzanne's husband, who's a former SEC lawyer, which is very ironic. And I thought, gee, that's a huge conflict of interest. Why would we have only one lawyer, and it's her husband? And why don't we have contracts with our staff? Well, why don't we have, I guess we don't even have any clear dispute resolution that was even written. And when I asked Suzanne about that later on that evening, she said, well, first of all, we don't need to be registered because, that's statist, and she's throwing all these words about that, saying, everything's going to be on the blockchain, like very vaguely. It's on the blockchain, like, ooh, it's this magical place where everything gets resolved. And I go, what blockchain? What code? How do you intend to do this? And she goes, and I thought, well, gee, for an organization that's going to be taking money from investors, to not have a dispute resolution in place, to not have an organization in place, to not have financials in place, to not have a white paper in place, to not have a business plan in place, like, holy crap, we are going to be and then with this imminent crackdown, I thought to myself, I don't want to go to jail, and I don't want to get anyone else in trouble, and I have to do the right thing and look at my options. So I waited a couple days, and I made obviously the right decision in the end. So
yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that. You kind of answered the next question I was going to be getting at, because you were promoting BitNation at Coins in the Kingdom, and I remember you guys were very enthusiastic about it, and I was very surprised that it was about a week later that you decided to resign. So I was kind of wondering what happened within that short time frame. So it was like the SEC stuff. That was something I was kind of concerned with too. I'd asked Susanna, how do you expect to kind of interface with some of these government agencies? Because if you're offering competing services, are you going to be offering them for governments or in place of government? And how are you going to kind of interface? And I don't know that was very well answered.
I don't think it was
well, so it's a good point. We were, and are, at least I think I can speak for both of us, excited about the concept. But we ran into a couple of issues. The first one is, we spent until the last minute trying to get Suzanne to, at the very least, give us an extra week to put in all of the things that we wanted to put in, like a U.S. IP block, so that we don't solicit U.S. investors. And we weren't able to get that.
like access control list basically on the server. I mean, that's
Sure.
so simple to implement. We wanted to get SSL integrated. I know that's something that obviously that was my responsibility, and unfortunately, the provider just never got back to me. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
to do
Well,
that.
the thing that
So,
the big thing that that got me, the straw that broke the camel's back for me, Nathan is staying with me, and I can see that he's working, basically 20 hours a day, trying to get this thing out the door. And on Friday night, he drank a little too much coffee, had a little too many Red Bulls, and his heart rate spiked. And so we had to call an ambulance and take him to the hospital and sit with him for a couple of hours until they brought it down. And her response was, are we still launching? And so for me, one of my hard and fast rules is I try very hard not to work with people who are not compassionate. And that to me was really just kind of summed it all up in the way that she treats people and in the way that people react to her. And so that really was the final thing for me. But that being said, still believe in the concept, just hoping to get it done in a different way. And so to answer your question about the integration with existing government services, one of the things that I worked on at BitNation was strategy, implementation strategy, and go-to-market strategy. And so we talked about was doing it really to start with as kind of a game. It's an interesting concept and it's just for fun, and it doesn't actually have legal standing. But over time, what happens is because the blockchain is transparent and because it's forever and because the veracity is guaranteed, it can get adopted as a legal document and over time become integrated. But this is long-term change. This is generational change. This is not something that happens, in 6 weeks. And then the other disagreement I had was, she really wants to focus on the developing world, which is phenomenal. My wife is Filipino. We have property in the Philippines that we have an issue with. So I certainly understand and emphasize, but they don't have any money. Now, the developed world does, and there's a lot of disenfranchised people in the developed world who would be thrilled with alternative government services. We're talking about, ex-convicts, people in the polyamory community, people who are sex workers, people who are really disenfranchised from current society. And I really felt that that's what we should focus because we need a positive cash flow, or at least a neutral cash flow, so we can have a long runway and be able to do all of this later. And that really wasn't her approach, and so my other concern was, well, how long-lived is this? It doesn't really matter how much we raise. It's never going to be enough to try to change the world's governments all in one, swipe.
Yeah, and there's so much infrastructure that needs to be built in these developing countries to support these kinds of things that we want to see. Were you going to say something, Nathan?
I was just going to say that I love the idea of the ambassador network, and I thought that Abby, who ran the ambassador network, did a phenomenal job. I know that Jeffrey, I think, may still be involved with it with BitNation, and I wish him the best of luck with the ambassador network. And I think that was a really good idea and strategy that Suzanne had. I just think that we lacked the time and also the policies to sort of implement these ideas. It just was a bit disorganized, and I know that they could have worked that out. But I think one of my biggest concerns is that if we're going to be focusing on the developing nations and undeveloped nations, and there's a language barrier there, how the heck do we communicate with these potential investors? I saw a lot of emails coming in from potential investors wanting to learn a bit more about BitNation, and I thought to myself, well, gee, if we don't have someone translating this into a language they can understand, do they know what they're getting into? And I think the answer is pretty clear: they don't. Otherwise, they wouldn't.
Yeah, and that was the other thing is, we actually had a lot of private investors that were interested. It really wouldn't have been very difficult to create a corporation, get private investment, and do it the right way. And by the way, that's exactly what Ethereum did. Is they raised $500,000 from their own internal team at the beginning. Yeah. They used that to create the proof of concepts and the documentation and all of everything that they needed, and then they went to the crowdfunding. We kind of skipped that middle step, and we went straight to crowdfunding, which I wasn't very comfortable with. And really the reasons that were given, which is, how can we be against government if we're actually using government? Well,
it's a stepping stone. I mean, like, how do you expect people to be in this governance 2.0 world when they don't even know it? There's no objective reality there. They can't live in this world. How do you do contracts? And so, I mean, it just kind of goes to show that she just doesn't understand how contract law even works. And she mentions about, it's going to be done through the British common law. to resolve a lot of these issues. And I think, well, gee, British common law uses contracts and uses the rule of law to be able to enforce this stuff in the courts. So what are you talking about?
Right. Well, and then the other part of it is, corporations exist not just for the safety of the government. They exist for the safety of the officers and the employees of the corporation. That's kind of the point. So by depriving us of that, it deprived us of that safety. And also, governments, whether it's the U.S. government or the Russian government or any government, they're the largest and best coordinated, most funded organizations on the planet. You're not going to win by sticking a finger in their eye. No. The idea, at least my idea, has always been, we're in a better system, we have milk and cookies, come join us. So, you don't do that by poking them. So the idea was to just, leave them alone and abide by current law, which is the reason why when I got married on the blockchain, I didn't just get married on the blockchain. My wife's and I marriage is legal in the state of Florida and filed in the state of Florida. Doesn't mean I enjoy it and doesn't mean I want to do it, but, I have to recognize the legal reality. There wasn't a lot of recognition of legal reality in this case.
Right, that was a huge concern of mine too, because yes, it's very nice to picture this kind of idealist utopia way far off in the future where we can use blockchain technology for a lot of the things that we use government for now, but you have to have that kind of bridge. What was the reason that she gave for rushing the crowd sale so quickly after just the concept arising?
Well, MK, I asked her that very same question pretty much 2 days before the crowd sale launched, and she says, I have a plan, we can do it, and anything that we don't have, we can make up on the way. It's going to be fine, don't worry. And that was it. And I said, well, we're not ready, and we don't have a dispute resolution form in place, and we don't have even a holdings organization. And I know that was one of our biggest pushbacks was, well, gee, we don't have a registered corporation, and suddenly we're all statists and we love the government, we're kissing the ring of the government. Well, no, the fact is again, it's a bridge, and we could do what Ethereum did, have a holdings company, have something that at least we can enforce contracts if we have a dispute issue. And I was basically told, no, it's too bad. We're doing it my way or the highway. And so we chose the highway, the roads, the roads.
And it seems like, regardless of what people may think about Ethereum and the progress of that project, they did put a lot of work into it before they went for the crowd sale. There, you could, read the white paper and stuff like that. And I didn't see the white paper for BitNation until, was it the day of the crowd sale that it was released?
Which was more of a marketing document, and there was no proof of concept. Will Pangman on one of the other shows was mentioning this. He goes, when Satoshi Nakamoto came out with Bitcoin, he invented Bitcoin, and then he showed the white paper. That you got to show something. It has to be something like either intangible, something that you can run on your computer and say, hey, this works. Right. BitNation didn't have that. It was completely embarrassing.
Right, and the Ethereum implementation had a code base, and they had sample code, and they had reference projects. And remember, the Doug and Eris DAX were already released when they did their thing. So I mean, it's kind of comparing apples and oranges, I think.
Yeah, I read the white paper. I was really disappointed in it because it did seem like it was just kind of marketing this idea that didn't have a whole lot of substance behind it as far as code, things like that. So that was really concerning too. So what do you think of some of the explanations provided by maybe some of the other team members? Do you think that they're actually, what needs to be done, first before you'll feel, I guess, confident in the project? What are some things that need to be implemented? The team still needs to implement.
I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable in the BitNation project with Suzanne at its helm. I mean, the concept is great, and we can get a great team going, but not with, with her leading the way, unfortunately.
Well, for me, look, I was one of the people who defended Suzanne all the time. I stuck by her, and when I can, I will defend her on things that she definitely deserves. I'm not about to say necessarily that she needs to leave the project, but I definitely think if she's not willing to listen to the team or listen to reason and listen to the ideas that people have in terms of not just the organization, but the white paper, and like actually implementing code on the site that's going to run and work, having Counterparty actually operate, not having false numbers in the site, which it still currently has. If I remember, I checked it last night. The numbers are wrong on the site, which is deceptive. Not calling what you're offering a crypto equity when it's no voting rights, essentially you're offering unregistered security. And I know that there would be some regulatory organizations that would have an issue with that. So if she gave voting rights and offered a proper white paper, I know that Blake Anderson called it sort of like a yellow paper, just lacked those guts that you sort of needed in a white paper. If it had that in a business plan and in financials, and we had a registered organization and a third-party lawyer, someone like Pamela, who's I know watching, or she was RSVP, we would hire her in an instant. But that didn't happen, and I don't think that's going to happen under Suzanne's leadership.
Right, and the technologist world in this space is not very big. There's a couple of thousand of us, worldwide at the moment. Most of us know each other, and having involved multiple technologists in this project, and being a technologist myself, you need a particular type of personality to pull those people together and to get them motivated and to get them cranking. Whatever you might want to say about Vitalik, and I think that he's a fantastic person and genius, watch how his teams operate. They are all incredibly loyal to him, and they put in incredible amounts of hours for no other reason than the fact that it's him leading the project. So, that to me was very much what Charles Hoskinson represented. And if he was in charge of the project, then, fantastic. But, again, that involves a change of leadership, unfortunately.
Well, and the way blockchain technology is progressing too, we're seeing all of these implementations that are going to become mandatory for any kind of future projects or things like this. I mean, you need dispute resolution involved. You need all these things. You need, multi-signature wallets, and and this is something that a lot of people are willing to help with too. So I guess I'm just not seeing, and hopefully, maybe this is being worked on. I would like to hope that she's listening to some of the other advice that's out there, because I've heard pretty similar criticisms from other people on the World Crypto Network about it too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. I mean, she was on the show just prior to the launch. I think it was on the 13th, and she was in London at what was it, the Vapor meetup?
Yeah,
Vapor meetup, and I believe Chris Ellis may have been there. Others were there, and they were asking these questions like, "Are you using multi-signature wallets on your site?" And she said, "We are." And I know that was a concern. I know that she had mentioned that it was de facto multi-sig, which really makes no sense to me. I don't know what she meant by that. Anyone who looked at the site would see that obviously it wasn't multi-sig. So I don't know if either she was mistaken or she was purposely being deceptive, but that's something that I think that the person running the organization would know, should understand how that operates and how that works.
Look, BitNation is a fantastic concept.
Love it.
What it requires is a fantastic leader. And Suzanne was, to give her props, she was able to get a lot of people together, talking at the same place at the same time about the same thing. So let's just give her all of the kudos for that.
Sure.
But unfortunately, it's not sufficient, and what you need is someone like Charles to really take the reins and lead this to where it should go. But again, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and this will take a very, very long time
years, probably.
Yeah, generations to penetrate society and become really ubiquitous.
Yeah, and I definitely, I'm not trying to slander anyone. I try to assume that, the best of intentions are involved here. So do you think BitNation is simply a case of over-enthusiasm coupled with this lack of preparation before the crowd sale? Or do you think there may be something a little bit deeper? Do you think there, there was maybe, too much of a rush into this for the wrong reasons?
I don't know. It's hard for me to say what her motivations are. It's always very difficult to understand what's inside somebody else's head. So I'm not really sure I want to speculate on that. I'd like to say that, at least the rest of us were in it with the best of intentions. It'll be fine. It'll be other companies with other similar ideas, and, it'll just take time. And I just want to remind people when the internet was, if this is October of 14, in October of 1994, what did the internet look like? And what does it look like 20 years later? So what is the blockchain going to look like in 20 years? And are we going to have a BitNation in 20 years? Yeah, very likely, very possibly. That's exactly where the demographics and technology is going. But 20 years is a long time.
Yeah, it is. So what are some of the other Bitcoin 2.0 projects you're excited about that you think have that potential to succeed?
I would let David answer that one. I think that he's a little bit more involved with Governance 2.0 solutions and some of the things that we've been discussing privately. So I just want him to answer only because I want to make sure I'm not saying things I shouldn't be saying. That.
So and then if you notice at the bottom of the screen it says Blockchain Factory. So in 2015, Blockchain Factory, which Nathan and I are partners, is going to focus on two specific applications of the 2.0 ledger, and that is bit marriage and deeds and titles. So for bit marriage, we really want to popularize the idea of putting your vows into the blockchain. And for people who study history, right now we talk about diamonds are a girl's best friend, and that when an engagement happens, it has to be a diamond, and the value of the diamond should be about 3 times your monthly salary. The case, that was invented by a great marketer in the 1930s, if I'm not mistaken, and it really transformed society. So I'm hopeful that we can, to some degree, do the same thing. I think that if we pull on the right heartstrings, because in the end, the libertarian community and the anarchist community are relatively small, and in order for this to really take off, we have to bring it to the masses, and we have to, make the language more simple. We need to make the conversation simpler, and we need to play in emotions, because an intellectual sell only gets you so far. And then the other part of it is I really do want to work on deeds and titles. This is a significant problem both in the U.S. and abroad. In the U.S., just conveyance fraud is a $500 million a year problem. And yet recently there was a story in the New York Post about a woman who owned a house, or owns a house, townhouse in New York. She doesn't live in New York. The townhouse water bill spiked all of a sudden, so she went out to New York to look at it, and she found that someone moved into her house and is claiming that it's theirs. And they filed
squatter, basically, right?
Well, yeah, squatter. But they filed paperwork with the city, and they're trying to get that house out from under her. That's conveyance fraud, and this technology has an opportunity to fix that. And in the developing world, Herman de Soto talks about $10 trillion of undeeded land, or dead capital, dead land, in the developing world. I are one of the undeeded. We have land in the Philippines. We've built a house on that land. We do not have a deed or title to that land. And so obviously we're exposed, and we're concerned about fraud. And it's less of a concern because her family lives in it, but if we weren't there, it would be a big concern. And this technology promises to revolutionize, resolve all of those issues. And so I've had some, or we've had some interest from some very interesting people and some notable people in the industry, both in this industry and in other industries. We know that both the UN and NATO and the IMF are all interested in this technology for things like bringing governance back to places with natural disasters or war zones. Eastern Ukraine is a great example. I'm Ukrainian. Some of my developers are in the Ukraine, and the stories you hear are really horror stories. And this technology has the opportunity to, if not stop those horror stories, but at least give people the opportunity to resolve those issues in the back end. So I'm personally motivated. I think there's a lot of money to be made as well. And so in 2015, that's what we're going to focus on.
And I think simplification is a good thing. I think, focus on a couple things, or maybe just one thing at one time. Make sure that you can get that right before you kind of broaden the scope. And that's probably the biggest red flag for me, was looking at the website and seeing that they wanted to kind of do everything at once, and that's certainly ambitious and very idealistic, but it's also very concerning because it's hard to do everything at once. You need specialization to a degree, and you want to make sure that things work too. You want to make sure that you can, focus on kind of some of the basics, or the things that are already being used. Pamela Morgan did an excellent talk at Coins in the Kingdom on smart contracts. Those are already being implemented and used. And let's work on the things that are being used, and that are kind of maybe a little more down to earth and realistic.
Yeah, agreed completely.
I agree.
And one of the things with having a non-technologist run what is in essence a technology company is they tend to underestimate the amount of effort involved. Even we as technologists underestimate that level of effort because we want to please the customer, and we want to tell the customer, sure, we'll get it done in a week. But in reality, it's more closer to 4 weeks.
4 weeks, yeah.
And it's very difficult to get that point across. These companies really need people who are, people like Vitalik, who really understand what it takes and how long it's going to take to really make them successful.
Well, and to Suzanne's defense a little bit, I know that she had indicated, at least to me, and perhaps only some of the members of our team, because certainly David wasn't aware, and a few others weren't. She did have some roadmaps as to where to get to these places with a lot of these apps and like dApps and which she wanted to implement for BitNation. But unfortunately, the website just didn't indicate that very clearly, so we didn't demonstrate that message to the public. And I mean, you weren't aware of it. Obviously, you've done your homework on what we're doing. You've read the white paper, and had that been demonstrated a little bit more easy, I think that perhaps the community would be more willing to work with us, because you can't build Rome in a day,
right.
And certainly we can't just have a website with nothing on it, but really well done graphics. Richard did an excellent job on the design, and then expect just people are just going to we're going to tape all this code together, and suddenly we're like on GitHub. And on GitHub at the very end was other people's code. We didn't have anything running. That's embarrassing. We don't.
Yeah.
That's not a BitNation. That's sort of a bit joke.
Yeah, I can imagine you all felt pretty embarrassed about that. Yeah. To my earlier point, one bit by bit has a little comment here. This is from earlier, but it also applied to the point I just made. You have cookies. I'm there, man. What do you, David and Nathan, think about just applying the blockchain technology to something small like Notary, such as doing work in conjunction with nationalnotary.org? So, yeah, Notary services would probably be a good.
Yeah,
I think so.
Absolutely. I mean, a Notary provides really two services. They provide veracity of identity, and they provide veracity of contract.
Mm-hmm.
And the blockchain can certainly serve to do that. The one place that we currently have a deficiency is in identification, right?
Mm-hmm.
There really isn't a strong ID system out yet. But the good news is that David Dakini is working on ID Coin and making really great progress.
Yeah.
Charles Hoskinson wrote a white paper on identity management, and so have a number of other people. Mm-hmm. So it's moving along, and I think we need it, quickly in order for this to really be viable. But it's being developed, so it'll happen. But yeah, I agree completely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, coming from Vancouver, we have a huge influx of people coming from Asian countries where we have tons of notary companies that have popped up. In British Columbia alone, we have, probably hundreds upon hundreds of different notary organizations that work to get people citizenship, and I think that something on the blockchain would be fantastic, certainly in the Vancouver region where 51% of the population are actually immigrants coming from overseas. So I think that would be excellent. I guess even passport management services. As many of you know, I temporarily misplaced my passport,
right.
Which you're in a foreign country. I was told this. I was like, well, you can't get on the plane to go back to Canada. You're stuck in America. So find a way home. And I said, I don't have my ID. I don't have anything. I don't have my driver's license with me. I don't have anything. So Matt McKibben saved the day and let me his card, called his credit card company and let me borrow a few $100 until I could get back in to my country. But I was told by Ottawa that they said you're going to have to wait in Orlando or in the U.S. for at least 3 days, and then you get to go down to the embassy, and then we'll process the paperwork, and it's going to be a huge hassle, and then we might let you back in the country.
And the thing is, though, we should be able to have a passport on here, right? We have my bank accounts are on there, or plane tickets are on there. Why not a passport? But the only way that works, the only way it really works, is if you're actually cooperating with the government. You have to meet their standards, you have to get them to agree, and you have to get them to adopt it. And if you're doing whatever you're doing by poking a finger in their eye, they're people like the rest of us. They're not going to be interested in working with someone who's obviously antagonistic.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we do live under a system where a passport is necessary. Ideally, I don't think you should need a passport to travel from country to country, But, this is a situation we kind of, are forced to live under. I got a good question. I wanted to take a question from Leif Taylor. Hey, Leif, thanks for watching. Do you think not using the term Bitcoin and just call it money or whatever tech you're revamping with the blockchain will help for user adoption to the masses?
Yeah, I'm trying to spread the concept of calling them tickles. What do you make? We make tickles. Because it's TCL, Transparent Crypto Ledger. And if you're going to say it, right, you're not going to say TCL. It's just easier to say tickle. So what do you sell? I sell tickles. Don't tickle me.
You know, I like that. That kind of, casts a softer image on it because you hear so much about, oh, the scary deep web and,
Right.
I've seen like ridiculous things like I'm saying, oh, well, what if terrorists use Bitcoin to buy nuclear weapons or something outrageous like that. And the media focuses so much on the negativity
Yeah.
and tickle sounds really cute.
Yeah, we had the same thing in '94, right? I mean, the internet. Oh my God, it's going to destroy the world. And
Child
we
molesting
finally got much
terrorists.
better. And there's David Duchovny.
Yeah, let's take David Duchovny's question. Longtime listener, first time caller. Thanks, David. Tell me more about this ID coins thing,
Well,
mutation.
yeah, I think he's messing with us a little bit because he's the one developing it, and so he knows about it in reputation management. But yeah, the whole kind of point of having an ID coin is to link a reputation, an online reputation that has a cost, to that identity. You don't want people to run civil attacks, and you don't want people to throw away identities at the drop of a hat. On the other hand, there is this incredible need for real anonymity, especially in places like Iran, Iraq, Eastern Ukraine, places like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very, very difficult problem to solve. And on the one hand, you need, the ability to identify a person, but on the other hand, you need to give them the ability to have anonymity. I haven't delved into all of the technical issues that he's working on. I just haven't had the time. But in conversations with him, he's incredibly smart, very experienced, knows what he's doing, so has my full confidence, and I'm just eager to see what he develops.
Yeah, so what do you see as kind of the biggest hindrances to offering competing government services if these projects, can be implemented over time? How does one opt out of a blockchain, or do you kind of view the blockchain itself as a possible issue? If there's a hard fork or something like that, like what happens to that data?
Well, I don't like to talk about the blockchain. I strongly believe there will
A
be many.
blockchain.
Right. So, and different kinds of blockchains with different properties and different proofs of work, stake, whatever. And it's really just using the right tool for the job. But, the whole idea is that everything is voluntary, right? So, I have this really simple question when I talk to people about socialism. And so, having been born in the USSR and really remembering what it was like, it's kind of a pet thing of mine. And the only question I ask is, what do you do with the refuseniks? And if the answer is we shoot them, we imprison them, we deport them, we exile them, then you're a socialist or a communist, and I have a real problem. But if the answer is they do whatever they want, it's a voluntary organization, then you're a voluntarist. And then that's a very different proposition. And now I'm very much for you. And so if the answer is that people get to opt out of various blockchains because they simply aren't interested and it isn't something that they want to participate in, absolutely fine.
Yeah, I definitely see, the idea of competing governance services as being a good thing as long as it's sort of a free market opt-in type thing. But unfortunately, one of the issues we're going to run into is if we're finding a lot of these governance services cooperating with the government, you're also going to find people who are lobbying for the government, and then they get special protection, and then it becomes this oligopoly, or it becomes a special privilege thing, and suddenly, you're cornering the market on this governance services, and it turns into a mini government, and it turns into this involuntary system of totalitarianism, and it just becomes a mini government within itself, and it defeats the purpose, and it's completely antithetical to obviously what BitNation and others are trying to do. So.
Right, and this is why I talk about how important it is to have transparency, because when humanity sees unfairness, humanity reacts. But the problem is that humanity doesn't always see the unfairness. Transparency and the veracity of the data of the blockchain is what really makes it possible.
Yeah, and I think that is a pretty strong argument in a lot of ways. I identify probably closest to a panarchist, or let's have kind of voluntary governance, have people pick and choose. But I think the problem of cartelizing is always there. I don't know that there's ever a perfect solution to that, but I do hope as things become more transparent and we have these protections through the blockchain that becomes less possible over time. It is always a possibility, but yeah, you do kind of hope that with the trajectory that this technology is on, that can be resolved in some kind of way.
Well, I think the goal of solving the government problems during my lifetime is ambitious enough. Those other problems I'll leave to my kids.
All right. So so we kind of talked a little bit about your new projects. Do you want to add any more details about those? Anything else on the horizons that be working on?
I think those two are kind of the big ones I'm focusing on. There's a couple of others that are kind of interesting. One is something that I'm calling BTC to MySQL, and this is really just having the blockchain in a SQL database. So you can just issue SQL calls to it and do select star where, just to make it easier for developers to develop instead of using the JSON API and trying to go at it. And that should be ready in several weeks. I've been trying to get at it, and unfortunately, I've been having some problems with my other e-commerce websites that took priority, so I had to do that. And then the other thing that we're pushing kind of hard is something called the slicer. And so the slicer is a technology that we developed for time slicing of large mining equipment. So if you have, for example, a 2 terahash box, you can point it at the Bitcoin blockchain and make some money. But if you point it to anything else, you're going to run a 51% attack on it, and it's going to basically dump that coin. And so what this technology allows you to do is to take two T's and turn it into 2,000 G's, and repurpose each of those G's in any way you want. So hypothetically, 2,000 different mining pools or blockchains or whatever. You slice it as 400, 400, 400, whatever you want. And so it's technology that we have that we think that mining pools are interested in. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of actively making phone calls and looking for people to license it to.
License it. We've been talking to clients and partners, and we've gotten quite a lot of interest. So yeah. I'm just hanging out here and against my will in beautiful Pompano Beach, Florida. When I could be back home in Vancouver with the beautiful rain. But instead, I'm here on those beaches and beautiful people, and I'm helping him set up his company. I'm helping with the communications. I'm doing some of the technical writing. I'm helping with some of the sales.
Yeah, we're bribing him with Joyce's cooking.
It's beautiful cooking. So, I'm just helping David out and enjoying my time here as much as I can.
Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And we got a question from Pamela Morgan. Thanks so much for watching, Pamela. Yeah. Awesome, thank you. Thanks, David and Nathan, for coming on. How can people learn more about and get involved with Blockchain Factory projects?
Well, that's really easy. So we're working on standing up a website, and we'll have something up very shortly. But in the meantime, everyone knows Nathan, so just reach out to Nathan, and he'll coordinate.
Yeah, just email Nathan at blockchainfactory.com, or you can email Nathan at ubiquity.io. But that's a little bit easier to remember.
Yeah, whichever one.
Whichever one. I'm on Skype as Nathan Wosnack. I'm on Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah, we're easy to find.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's going to be my next question. Where can people keep up with you guys? So
yeah, we'd love to get all the help we can get for sure. We're obviously going to spread the word. So we're on Google, Facebook,
Counterparty group,
Reddit, Skype.
Breakfast Club Skype group, which is weird.
Yeah, right. Well, like pretty much everywhere. So we're really easy to find, and we'll take all the help we can get.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on BitNation or any of your other projects?
I like your hair.
Thank you.
I would just say that I wish, I do wish Suzanne the best. I don't have any personal qualms, anything with her. I do wish her the best. As much as I had worked 20 hours, up to 20 hours a day, I did enjoy some of the times we had, and I hope that she can lead a good team, and I certainly hope that she's learned something from this, and I hope that others have learned from this. I hope that there could be full disclosure on these kinds of projects, and that people just don't jump into something when they're not ready. And I just want investors to be ready for what they're, what they've been kind of sold a bill of goods on with BitNation and others. So.
Yeah, 2014 has really had, it's been a year of a lot of disappointments in terms of fraud in the Bitcoin marketplace. We had Mt. Gox, we had who's the guy that just recently, was it Adam or Andrew or something?
Oh yeah, forget.
Anyway, so but and just recently today, someone announced about a problem with Next. I'm really hoping that in 2015 we can stop doing that and really start focusing on building real value for real people and getting money for it. So be nice.
Agreed. There are a lot of scams out there, and you have to do your due diligence with these things.
Absolutely.
And really ask the hard questions.
You're well aware of the ones that I've obviously had in the past as well, and I've run into a bunch of scams and stuff. And I think it's just a matter of the community holding people who do these kinds of activities to task and making them accountable for their behavior, and letting them know that, hey, you know what, this isn't acceptable, and that the rule of law will still exist and apply to the Bitcoin community. I've been here for, you know, around 3 years, you know, since 2009, but I left, came back, and I've seen a lot of bad people, but I think that what keeps bringing me back is people like you, people like David and his wife, and Blake Anderson and his wife, and everyone else. I mean, just the community. We're here, we're making progress, we're doing great things, and then, you know, just got to keep forging ahead. It's a beautiful world out there.
Exactly. Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining me, guys. I really appreciate you adding some clarification to this whole issue, and yeah, thanks for taking the time. It was great talking with you as always. And actually, I want to announce my guest next week will be my comrade from Bitcoin Not Bombs, Chris Pasillo. We're going to be talking about his new two-factor authentication app that he was working so hard at. Hard on at PorkFest, and you know, since I've seen him, so this is going to be a really cool discussion. We're going to be looking into this, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So until
I've been beta testing his application.
Oh,
cool.
Awesome! What do you think of it so far?
I haven't beta tested enough to give my answer yet.
All right. Well, we'll find so until then, keep calm and encrypt on.
Have a good one.
Peace.